You know the ending of Citizen Kane, the sled burning in the furnace, Rosebud painted across the wood. What you don't know is that Orson Welles fought RKO for 3 weeks to keep that scene. The studio wanted it cut entirely. Look closely at the snow globe in the opening shot. It's a completely different prop in the close-up than in the wide angle, and that's just the beginning of what William Randolph Hearst's lawyers tried to destroy. The studio didn't just want to cut the sled, they wanted to burn the entire film. Number 1. The opening newsreel sequence, News on the March, feels like authentic 1940s footage, and that's because it basically is. Everyone knows Welles was parodying the March of Time newsreels, but here's what most people miss. RKO secretly hired actual newsreel cameramen from Pathé and hired them under fake production names to avoid union complications. Greg Toland's cinematography notes from October 1940 reveal they hand-scratched the film negative to create artificial aging. Look closely at the grain pattern. It's too consistent, too deliberate. Each scratch was added in post-production, frame by frame. The sequence cost $50,000 to produce, which was more than the entire budget of some B-movies RKO released that same year, and the studio had no idea until they saw the invoice. Number 2. Rosebud is the most famous last word in cinema history, but it almost didn't exist. Welles originally wanted Kane to die in complete silence. No final word, just the snow globe falling. Herman Mankiewicz fought him for weeks, insisting the audience needed closure. According to script supervisor Amalia Kent's production notes, 3 different endings were filmed in December 1940. 2 were destroyed immediately after test screenings. Watch Kane's lips in the death scene closely. The sync is slightly off. That's because Rosebud was added via ADR 3 weeks after principal photography wrapped. Welles recorded it alone in a sound booth, whispering into a microphone while watching playback. But the real battle wasn't about whether Kane would speak. It was about what Rosebud actually meant. Number 3. The deep focus cinematography is considered Greg Toland's revolutionary achievement, taught in film schools as intentional innovation. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. It wasn't purely artistic. It was a budget hack. Toland's February 1941 article in American Cinematographer hints at this, but production memos reveal the full story. RKO couldn't afford the time or money for multiple camera setups with traditional Hollywood lighting. Toland and Welles developed deep focus, partly because they needed to shoot faster and cheaper. Watch the background actors throughout the film. Because everything's in focus, you can spot dozens of continuity errors. Extras' positions shift between cuts. Props appear and disappear. In the Inquirer office scenes, the same background actor walks past the same desk 3 times in one sequence. The technique that changed cinema forever was born from financial necessity. Number 4. The breakfast table montage shows Kane's marriage to Emily dissolving through quick vignettes. 6 years of deterioration compressed into 90 seconds of pure visual storytelling. Film classes teach it as Welles' innovation, but he didn't invent this technique. He stole it directly from banned Soviet montage films, particularly Sergei Eisenstein's work. RKO's November 1940 studio notes show they almost cut the entire sequence over concerns about communist propaganda techniques. The censors backed down only after Welles reframed it as European art cinema influence. Notice Ruth Warwick's costume and hair changes across each vignette. The costume department created 6 distinct periods of 1890s and 1900s fashion, but watch the newspaper Kane reads in the final shot. The prop department accidentally used a 1940 Los Angeles Times. It's visible for exactly 3 frames. Number 5. The mirror shots in Xanadu look impossibly expensive. Kane and Susan reflected infinitely during their confrontation, creating a visual metaphor for their trapped relationship. But RKO couldn't afford the massive custom mirrors the production designer wanted. The effects team used matte paintings for most of the reflections instead. Look at the left edge of the frame during the "you can't do this to me" argument. The reflections don't quite match Kane's movements because they were painted based on rehearsal footage, then composited in post-production. Set designer Perry Ferguson's notes reveal the matte painting crew was literally working on canvases until 11 p.m. the night before filming. Some paintings were still wet when photographed. Welles approved them without ever seeing them in person because he was simultaneously directing a radio show in another building. Number 6. In January 1941, Hearst's attorney sent a formal memo to RKO president George Schaefer with an explicit offer, $800,000 to destroy the negative and all prints of Citizen Kane before release. That sum was nearly double what the film cost to make. Hearst had already banned any mention of the film in his newspapers. Every Hearst publication in America, over 30 major papers, enforced total silence. Watch for the Inquirer masthead in the film. It was legally altered from Examiner after Hearst's lawyers threatened trademark lawsuits. Luella Parsons, Hearst's powerful gossip columnist, personally called Schaefer and told him, "You'll never work in this town again." She wasn't exaggerating. Within 3 years, Schaefer was forced out of RKO. Hearst's biggest weapon was already inside the studio. He'd bought stock in RKO's parent company. Number 7. Susan Alexander Kane's disastrous opera debut is played for pure humiliation. Her voice cracks. The audience cringes. Kane watches in complete denial. Dorothy Cummingore delivers the performance of someone who absolutely cannot sing, except Cummingore was actually a trained opera singer who'd studied for 6 years before becoming an actress. In a 1970 film comment interview, she revealed it took 47 takes to sing badly in exactly the right way. Orson kept saying worse, more painful, but still technically accurate, she recalled. The audience reaction shots weren't acting either. Watch the extras' faces closely. Many looked genuinely confused and uncomfortable because Welles didn't tell them what kind of performance they'd be reacting to. He just had Cummingore sing and captured their real unscripted responses. Number 8. Orson Welles was 25 years old when he played Charles Foster Kane from Youth to Death, but he wasn't RKO's first choice. In September 1940, studio executives secretly screen tested Cary Grant for the role. A memo from Schaefer to Welles, discovered in RKO archives in 1978, refers to the Grant situation and asks Welles to expedite makeup tests for age progression. Early photos show a different actor in Kane's old age prosthetics. The eyebrows are wrong, the nose different. Grant was 36, more age appropriate, and a proven box office draw. He turned it down after reading the script. According to Grant's biographer, he told RKO the role was uncastable by anyone. He saw the final film at a private screening in 1941 and reportedly called Welles afterward to say he'd been right. No one else could have played Kane. Number 9. In the screening room scene, Kane sits alone watching footage of Susan's opera performance. The projection beam cuts through the darkness, light flickering across his devastated face. It's atmospheric, moody, and technically impossible. The 1940 projection equipment used on set was completely non-functional. It was an empty prop casing borrowed from another production. Watch the angle of the projector beam compared to the screen position. The geometry doesn't work at all. The light source is actually outside the frame, operated by a crew member with a follow spot. Welles and cinematographer Greg Tolan blocked the scene knowing the projector was fake, then had actors react to a blank wall while light was manually directed at their faces. Behind the scenes photos reveal the actual light source positioned 6 feet to the left of where the projector appears to be. Number 10. The Everglades picnic sequence was supposed to be shot on location in Florida to capture authentic swamp atmosphere. Budget cuts changed everything. It was filmed in Los Angeles during an unseasonably rare rainstorm in February 1941. Script supervisor Amelia Kent's diary excerpts describe conditions. Mud was knee-deep, Welles had the flu, and was directing while running a 102-degree fever. Multiple crew members threatened to quit. The schedule said 2 days, but it took 6 miserable days. Watch the background carefully in these scenes. What's supposed to be swamp is obviously a painted backdrop. You can see where the canvas wrinkles in the wind. The tropical plants in the foreground are real, but everything beyond 10 feet is completely fake. In one wide shot, you can actually see the bottom edge of the backdrop where it doesn't quite meet the ground. Number 11. Citizen Kane's official budget was $839,527, carefully documented in RKO records. But Welles secretly filmed over 60 hours of footage and hid costs by distributing expenses across unrelated RKO productions. A post-production audit discovered in 1956 revealed the studio found $217,000 in overages that Welles and the Mercury Theater production team had deliberately concealed. Watch the film closely across different scenes. Certain sequences have noticeably different film stock with grainier texture and slightly different contrast. That's because they were shot on leftover stock from other productions to hide costs. The breakfast montage uses 3 different film batches. The newsreel uses expired stock. One RKO board member, according to March 1941 meeting minutes, suggested pursuing criminal fraud charges against Welles. The studio's lawyers advised against it because the publicity would hurt RKO more than Welles. Number 12. In the Inquirer office scene, Kane and Leland celebrate their first edition with late-night revelry and obvious intoxication. The original script, preserved in the USC Warner Brothers archives, contained explicit references to cocaine use. The scene described white powder on Leland's desk and dialogue about Kane's powder room that was absolutely not about restrooms. rooms. The Hayes Office Production Code Administration demanded 14 specific dialogue cuts in November 1940. Watch Leland's desk across different shots in that sequence. Props appear and disappear between takes because they were removed during the ongoing censorship battle. A small metal box visible in early takes vanishes in later angles. The Code Office's notes specifically mention removal of paraphernalia suggesting drug use. But the censors missed something. Look at the background in one wide shot. There's still a small mirror on the side table. Number 13. Joseph Cotten plays Jedediah Leland, Kane's best friend and conscience. But Cotten directed more of his own scenes than anyone realized. Welles was frequently absent from set, directing radio broadcasts, locked in editing rooms, fighting with RKO executives. According to Mercury Theater production records, Cotten blocked and rehearsed numerous scenes himself, a direct violation of Directors Guild contracts, but the Mercury Theater crew covered for him. In a 1975 interview, Cotten admitted, "I directed more than people know. Orson would tell me what he wanted, then disappear. I'd stage it, and he'd approve it later." Watch certain camera angles in Leland's scenes closely. In several shots, particularly the hospital visit where old Leland confronts Thompson, you can see Welles' shadow on the back wall. He's not directing, he's operating the camera himself because the union cameraman had left for the day. Number 14. Kane works on a jigsaw puzzle in the vast emptiness of Xanadu, alone with his accumulated possessions and obsessions. The production used an actual 10,000-piece puzzle that took 3 days just to photograph properly because the lighting kept creating glare on the pieces. But here's what's strange if you look closely. Watch Kane's hands as he places pieces. They don't actually connect to adjacent pieces at all. The puzzle is an optical trick with pieces arranged to look assembled, but not actually fitting together. Set photographer Alex Cayley's notes reveal Welles noticed this during the first take. The prop master had arranged pieces for visual composition, not puzzle logic. Welles watched playback and said, "Keep it, it's perfect." The puzzle that doesn't connect became an accidental metaphor for Kane's entire life. Everything looks assembled from a distance, but nothing truly fits. Number 15. The ending everyone knows shows the sled burning while Rosebud is revealed, and the mystery is finally solved. But test audiences in March 1941 hated it completely. RKO's preview cards, preserved in the Academy's Margaret Herrick Library, show consistent complaints. Unsatisfying, confusing, pointless. The studio demanded an expensive reshoot. An alternative ending was written and filmed where Kane's adult son discovers the sled before it burns and donates it to a museum with a placard explaining its significance. Watch the final cut at exactly 1:53:12. There's a visible splice mark where the original ending was physically removed and the current ending inserted. You can see the difference in film grain for exactly 4 frames. RKO's test screening card specifically mentioned the museum ending as an option viewers preferred. Welles refused to use it in theatrical release. Number 16. The official premiere of Citizen Kane was May 1st, 1941 at the RKO Palace Theater in New York. Press releases proudly called it sold out to massive public interest. That was a complete lie. Financial records discovered decades later revealed that William Randolph Hearst operatives bought every single ticket for opening night and left the entire theater empty. The palace seated 1,800 people. Hearst paid for all of them just to humiliate Welles and RKO. Newsreel footage from the premiere shows a sparse crowd outside. Compare it to the mob scenes from Gone with the Wind's premiere. RKO covered the story by claiming capacity attendance without specifying that seats were purchased but unoccupied. The stunt worked perfectly. Reviews couldn't mention the empty theater without admitting they knew about the sabotage. The fake sellout led to distribution problems and delayed wider bookings. Number 17. Citizen Kane received 9 Academy Award nominations. It won 1. Best Original Screenplay, shared by Mankiewicz and Welles. What film histories rarely mention is what happened at the ceremony. When Welles' name was announced for the writing nomination, multiple Academy members booed audibly. Mankiewicz accepted the award alone. Welles was banned from the stage, not officially, but through unspoken industry agreement. He attended the ceremony and sat in his assigned seat. Newsreel footage from that night shows his seat empty during the screenplay presentation. That's because he was moved to a back row after the booing started. Academy records examined by film historian Robert Carringer show unusual proxy voting patterns for Best Picture and Best Director. Block votes against Kane that didn't match typical Academy distribution. Hearst's influence reached even the Academy's supposedly secret ballots. Number 18. Between 1942 and 1945, RKO quietly destroyed approximately 60% of all Citizen Kane prints in circulation. The official reason? Warehouse storage costs. The real reason? Ongoing pressure from Hearst and the continued belief that the film was a financial liability. Watch surviving prints from different eras. They have noticeably different color grades and contrast levels because they're multi-generational copies made from increasingly degraded source material. The original camera negative nearly didn't survive. In 1948, during a warehouse inventory reduction, it was marked for incineration. A film librarian named Lucille Johnston, according to RKO asset records archived in 1956, personally intervened and had it transferred to long-term storage. If she hadn't noticed that inventory sheet, the highest quality source for Citizen Kane would have been destroyed. No 4K restoration would have been possible. The greatest American film almost burned exactly like Rosebud. Number 19. In 1942, Marion Davies' family filed a defamation lawsuit against RKO, Welles, and Mankiewicz. The case was settled out of court. Terms were sealed until 1976. When the settlement documents were finally released, they revealed RKO paid an undisclosed sum, reported by industry insiders to be between $150,000 and $200,000. The studio also agreed to add a disclaimer to all future prints stating the film was fictional and not based on any real persons. Look at prints from the 1950s onward. There's an extra copyright card that doesn't appear in original 1941 prints. That's the settlement requirement. But here's the detail that never made it into film history books. The settlement amount was larger than Citizen Kane's total domestic profit through 1945. RKO paid more to silence the lawsuit than they ever made from theatrical release number 20. The sled burning in the furnace, Rosebud consumed by flames, childhood reduced to ash. Here's what Herman Mankiewicz never told anyone during production. That sled was his. He donated his actual childhood sled to the prop department. It wasn't a replica. It wasn't aged by the prop master. The wear on the painted name wasn't artificial. According to Mankiewicz's longtime friend and biographer Richard Merriman, Mankiewicz watched the burning scene being filmed and didn't tell Welles until weeks later. In a 1960 interview, Mankiewicz said, "I burned my own childhood and nobody noticed." Look at the painted Rosebud closely in high quality prints. The weathering pattern is authentic, decades of real use, not prop department aging techniques. The destruction wasn't symbolic, it was literal. Kane's lost innocence was actually Mankiewicz's, physically burned on camera, preserved forever on film. Return to that opening image, the snow globe falling, shattering, the camera pushing through the window of Xanadu. Now you know it's not just a different prop in different shots. It's a symbol of everything this production actually was. Beautiful illusions covering desperate improvisation, artistic triumph built on budget deception. The greatest film about a man who built an empire of lies was itself constructed from secrets, compromises, and battles that nearly destroyed it.